The planet Agaris Prime had once been a promising colony for Earth. Located on the fringe of known space, it was a world of extremes: vast deserts, frozen wastelands, and cities built in the shadows of towering mountains. But none of that mattered now. Agaris Prime had become a battleground, a place where humanity's future would either rise or fall. Earth's military, though small compared to some of the galactic powers, had grown stronger over the years. Yet, their enemies were not weak. The Velkar, a brutal, technologically advanced race, had waged war against humanity ever since Earth had begun to challenge their dominance in the galaxy. These aliens saw no room for competition. The galaxy was theirs to conquer. Their warships were massive, their weapons far beyond what any human could build, and Agaris Prime had become their next target. The Velkar had arrived with full force. Their ships blotted out the sky, casting long shadows over the land. Earth's soldiers had managed to dig in and fortify the planet's capital. But it was clear to everyone that this was going to be a fight they couldn't win without a miracle. For weeks, the human forces held strong behind the towering siege gate, an enormous fortress that stood at the entrance to the city. This was the last line of defense, and the battle for Agaris Prime would be decided here. If the siege gate fell, nothing would stop the Velkar from taking the city and the colony completely. Inside the gate's walls, soldiers moved like clockwork, preparing for the worst. Gunfire echoed in the distance as Velkar skirmishers advanced, trying to break through the human defenses. But the gate held strong. It was built to withstand anything except a full-on assault from the Velkar's advanced war machines. Maxim Baird stood at the heart of the human forces, watching the chaos unfold. He was a soldier like any other, but there was something different about him. His reputation had spread far beyond Agaris Prime. He had been part of numerous missions where victory seemed impossible, and each time, he had come out on top. Maxim was known for his fierce determination, but it wasn't just his fighting skill that set him apart, it was his unwillingness to quit. No matter how impossible the odds, Maxim never gave in. On this day, however, even his confidence was being tested. He looked around at the soldiers beside him. Many of them were veterans, having fought in countless skirmishes with the Velkar. They had seen destruction and death on a scale that would break most men, and yet, even they were beginning to question if they could hold the siege gate for much longer. "I don't think we can last much longer, Maxim," said Lieutenant Jorah, a seasoned officer who had been fighting with Maxim for years. His voice was quiet, almost as if speaking the words aloud would make them true. "They're getting too close." Maxim didn't respond right away. He just stared ahead, his gaze fixed on the distant Velkar warships hovering in the sky like dark omens. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. There was no escape, no reinforcements coming in time. But he also knew something that the others didn't. Humanity had faced worse odds before, and somehow, they always found a way to rise above them. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the ground, snapping him out of his thoughts. A piece of the siege gate's massive wall crumbled as a Velkar artillery shell slammed into it, sending chunks of rock and metal flying through the air. The soldiers around Maxim scrambled to their positions, shouting orders and moving to reinforce the gate. The battle had intensified. "We can't hold them off forever," Jorah said again, more urgently this time. "The gate's going to collapse." Maxim's eyes narrowed. The siege gate was made of a rare metal tougher than anything Earth's engineers had ever worked with. It was designed to hold off entire armies and withstand any weapon known to man or alien. But now, even the mighty gate was beginning to show signs of weakness. For a brief moment, Maxim considered the idea that they might lose, that Agaris Prime might fall, that Earth's expansion into the galaxy could come to an end. It was a terrifying thought. The Velkar would move on to other colonies, and there would be nothing to stop them. But then, as he watched the Velkar forces tightening their grip on the siege gate, something inside him snapped. He wasn't going to let it happen. Not like this. Not after everything humanity had been through. With a clenched fist, Maxim slammed his helmet onto his head and gave a sharp nod to Jorah. Without another word, he turned and began running toward the front line. "Maxim, what are you doing?" Jorah shouted. But Maxim didn't stop. He couldn't afford to stop. Maxim had heard the stories. the whispers among the veterans about the power of humanity's will. There were tales of human soldiers, fighters who, through sheer strength of spirit, had accomplished the impossible. He'd never quite believed it himself. But now, in the face of overwhelming odds, something inside him was urging him to act. He reached the first line of soldiers, who were struggling to hold their positions. They looked up in surprise as Maxim passed them, his steps sure and fast. He didn't stop. He didn't even flinch as explosions rocked the ground around him. Then, he saw it. The siege gate, a towering structure of alien design, stood in front of him, glowing faintly with the hum of powerful energy fields. It was the heart of the defense, and it was beginning to crack. The Velkar had found a way to weaken it. Maxim could feel the pressure building. He stopped just a few yards away from the gate, his heart pounding in his chest. It was now or never. His comrades had their weapons, their technology, but Maxim only had one thing: his own body, his fists, his strength. With a roar, Maxim lunged at the gate, throwing his entire weight into a powerful punch. The first blow was like hitting solid stone, unforgiving and harsh. His arm jolted with pain, but he didn't stop. He threw another punch, harder this time. The energy field around the gate flickered briefly, then stabilized again. Maxim gritted his teeth, feeling the sweat running down his face. He stepped back, taking a deep breath. His muscles screamed in protest, but he knew this was the only way. He punched again, harder, faster. This time, there was a sound, a crack like thunder, echoing across the battlefield. The siege gate's energy shield began to warp, bending under the force of his attack. For a moment, it looked as though nothing would happen, but then, with a deafening crack, the entire energy field collapsed. The gate shuddered, and the massive doors began to open, revealing the interior of the Velkar fortress. Maxim stood there, chest heaving, his hands bloodied and raw. He stared at the gate in disbelief. It had been a gamble, something no one would have believed was possible. But now, the impossible had become reality. The soldiers behind him stared in stunned silence. They had watched as Maxim, a single human, had done what no army could. He had cracked the siege gate bare-handed. "Forward!" Maxim shouted, his voice carrying over the battlefield. "We take the city now." The soldiers rallied behind him, charging forward as the once impenetrable gate fell before them. The Velkar, stunned by the breach, scrambled to regroup. Maxim had given humanity their first true victory on Agaris Prime. The siege gate had cracked, and with it, the Velkar's reign of terror had been broken. As the battle raged on, a new legend was born. The Earthborn Doom. Maxim Baird had shown the galaxy that humanity, though small and often underestimated, could never be counted out. And in that moment, the veterans, the soldiers, and even the Velkar knew one thing for certain: Earth had come to stay, and it would never be pushed out again. Maxim Baird stood at the edge of the battlefield, his chest heaving with exhaustion, but his spirit burning hotter than ever. The siege gate had fallen, the impossible had been done, the mighty Velkar had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. Maxim could feel the weight of their disbelief pressing against him. The stunned silence that followed his breakthrough. It was a victory, yes. But it was only the first step. The battle was far from over. The human soldiers had surged forward in the wake of the gate's collapse, pouring through the breach Maxim had created. The Velkar, once certain of their superiority, had faltered. They had expected Earth soldiers to be like any other. Their weapons and technology merely tools. Their will fragile and weak. But Maxim's bare-handed assault had shattered that expectation. It wasn't just the breach that had rattled them. It was the sheer willpower of the human soldier. The Velkar had never fought anything like this before. Now, Maxim and his team stood at the heart of the battle, moving fast to take full advantage of the chaos. The once imposing fortress of Korthal, a city of stone and metal that had once seemed invincible, was now within reach. Human forces pushed forward, regrouping at the breach as Velkar's soldiers scrambled to reinforce their defenses. Maxim's mind was a whirlwind of calculations. The mission had always been to hold the gate. Now, the battle had shifted. They were no longer just defending, they were advancing. Maxim looked around at his comrades, all of them pushing forward with the same unstoppable energy. Their eyes were filled with determination, their resolve sharpened by the knowledge that they had accomplished something no one believed was possible. The breach had done more than crack the gate, it had cracked the Velkar's confidence. They were on the back foot now. The humans could feel it. Maxim had led them through the breach, his body battered but his spirit unbroken. He didn't have the luxury of rest. There was no time to savor the victory. This was just the beginning. The city lay ahead, and with it, the Velkar's command center. That was where the true heart of the invasion resided. They had to reach it before the Velkar could regroup and fortify further. Maxim, Jorah's voice cut through the haze of smoke and battle noise. The lieutenant, a seasoned warrior with scars that told stories of past battles, caught up with Maxim. We're moving out, but the enemy is regrouping. We can't afford to wait. Maxim nodded grimly. We keep pushing, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. If we stop now, they'll regroup and dig in. We can't give them the chance. Together, they led their squad of soldiers deeper into the heart of the Velkar-held city. The streets were in chaos, littered with debris and the wreckage of fallen war machines. Human and Velkar bodies alike lay scattered in the streets, victims of the brutal fighting that had raged for hours. But despite the devastation, there was a strange sense of hope in the air. The humans had broken through. They had made their mark on the Velkar's perfect fortress. As they moved deeper into the city, Maxim's senses were on high alert. His eyes flicked from side to side, searching for signs of movement. The Velkar were no longer a disorganized force. They were reeling, yes, but they would adapt. Maxim knew better than to think this would be easy. Even in retreat, the Velkar were formidable. They were planning something. The ground rumbled beneath their feet as another explosion echoed through the streets. Maxim's heart skipped a beat. He didn't need to look back to know what had happened. The Velkar were trying to create a wall of fire, to trap the humans in the city. But Maxim wasn't going to fall into their trap. We need to move, now, he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. The squad moved with practiced precision, ducking into a narrow alley and sprinting toward the heart of the city. Maxim could feel the weight of the Velkar's eyes on him, even from a distance. They were watching, waiting, and Maxim knew they were planning their next move. The group moved swiftly, pushing through the smoke-filled streets, determined to reach their goal. But it wasn't going to be easy. The Velkar were regrouping faster than expected, and Maxim could sense the looming threat of a counteroffensive. Suddenly, a shadow loomed over them, a massive Velkar war machine, more advanced than anything the humans had ever faced. It was a behemoth of metal and firepower. Its massive guns pointed directly at Maxim's team. The streets seemed to narrow as it approached, the ground shaking under its weight. Maxim didn't hesitate. He knew what had to be done. "Cover fire!" he shouted to his team, and without missing a beat, they scattered, taking up positions behind whatever cover they could find. The war machine fired, sending blasts of energy into the buildings around them, turning them into dust. Maxim dove behind a concrete pillar just as the blast hit the ground nearby, sending debris flying in every direction. His armor took the brunt of the impact, but his bones still rattled from the force of the blast. Through the smoke, he could see the Velkar soldier inside the war machine, its commander, looking down at the humans with a cold, calculated expression. The Velkar had never thought humans could be a real threat, but they were learning quickly. Maxim could see the fear in the way they moved now. The Velkar commander barked orders, but Maxim didn't give them the chance to respond. He rose from cover, his weapon raised, and fired a barrage of shots at the war machine's weak points. The shots bounced off the armored exterior. But it wasn't the armor that Maxim was targeting. It was the machine's energy core. He had no time to second-guess himself. Maxim's team continued their cover fire, keeping the Velkar soldiers pinned down. But Maxim was focused on the war machine. With a roar, he charged forward, ignoring the blasts of energy that flew past him. His fists clenched tight, and just before the war machine's next shot could reach him, Maxim launched himself at the massive metal behemoth. In one swift movement, Maxim grabbed hold of the war machine's massive leg and used it as leverage to leap onto its side. The machine shuddered from the impact, and the Velkar commander inside was caught off guard. Maxim slammed his fist into the energy core, sending shockwaves through the machine. The Velkar commander shouted in surprise, but it was too late. With one final strike, Maxim shattered the core, and the war machine exploded in a burst of energy, sending shockwaves that rocked the entire street. Maxim was thrown back by the blast, his body slamming into a nearby wall. He could feel the blood on his lips, but he didn't care. The machine was destroyed, and with it, the Velkar's last advantage in this sector was gone. Maxim struggled to his feet, his vision blurry from the impact, but he grinned through the pain. "Keep moving," he yelled. "We're not done yet." The humans rallied again, pushing forward as the remaining Velkar forces hesitated. The loss of their war machine was a crushing blow, and Maxim knew that the momentum was shifting. But there was no time to rest. They had broken through once. Now, they had to keep breaking. The heart of the city lay ahead, and with every step they took, they were closer to their ultimate goal. The Velkar's command center. Maxim led the charge. He had proven that Earth soldiers could crack the siege gate. Now, they would prove they could crack the very heart of the Velkar Empire. They would show the galaxy that humanity wasn't just a force to be reckoned with, they were a force that could not be stopped. And as Maxim pushed forward, he could feel it. The Velkar had made a mistake. They had underestimated Earth. Now, humanity was coming for them, and nothing would stand in their way. Maxim Baird's body was bruised, battered, and soaked in sweat. But the fire inside him had never burned brighter. He stood at the edge of the war-torn city of Korthul, the capital of the Velkar Empire. The human soldiers, his comrades, had pushed the enemy back further than anyone could have imagined. The siege gate had been cracked open by his bare hands. The walls of the Velkar fortress were crumbling under their assault. And now, all that stood between them and victory was the heart of the Velkar Empire itself, their central command center. The city around him was a battlefield, with torn streets littered with rubble, fallen soldiers, and twisted remnants of war machines. The air was thick with smoke, the smell of burning metal and scorched earth lingering like a dark cloud. In the distance, Maxim could hear the roar of Velkar warships still circling above, but they seemed less confident now. The tide of battle had shifted. It was no longer about holding the line, it was about breaking the enemy completely. Maxim had seen it in their eyes. The Velkar were afraid. They had expected this war to be another conquest, another planet to add to their growing empire. But humanity had proven them wrong. Maxim's bare-handed destruction of the siege gate had shattered the image the Velkar had of Earth. They no longer saw humans as weak. Now, they feared what Earth's warriors were capable of. Jorah, his trusted lieutenant, came up alongside him. She had been with him through every fight, every mission. Together, they had survived the impossible. But this was different. This wasn't just a battle. It was the beginning of the end for the Velkar. "Maxim," Jorah said, her voice serious. "The command center is ahead. We've cleared most of the city, but we know the Velkar are regrouping. We can't underestimate them." Maxim nodded, his eyes scanning the city's horizon. "I know. They'll throw everything they've got at us. But we can't stop now. We've come this far." The two soldiers shared a silent look, understanding each other without words. Maxim knew the stakes were higher than ever. If they didn't take the command center, the Velkar would retreat, regroup, and strike back harder. This was the moment. If they could break the heart of the Velkar Empire, the war could be over, and Earth would stand victorious. They advanced through the ruins, their footsteps silent but purposeful. Maxim's team, a group of the most elite soldiers humanity had to offer, moved in tight formation. Their weapons were ready, their minds focused. The battle was far from over, but they were determined to see it through. As they neared the heart of Korthul, The streets grew eerily quiet. There were no more skirmishes, no more blasts echoing in the distance. Only silence. Maxim didn't trust it. The Velkar were preparing for something. He could feel it in the air, the tension rising with every step they took. Then, as they turned a corner, they saw it. The Velkar command center was a massive structure, towering over the city with its black spires piercing the sky. It was an imposing fortress, a symbol of the Velkar's dominance. But now, it was their target. Before they could get closer, a squad of Velkar soldiers appeared, emerging from the shadows. They were heavily armored and armed with advanced weaponry. But even as they raised their guns, Maxim's team was already in motion. The humans were faster, more agile, and more determined. The firefight was brief but intense. The Velkar soldiers fought with the precision of a well-oiled machine, but they were no match for the Earthborn warriors. Maxim led the charge, his strength and fury cutting through the enemy lines. His fists were like hammers, crushing anything that dared to stand in his way. One Velkar warrior attempted to take him down with a blast from a high-powered rifle, but Maxim sidestepped the shot with ease. In a blur of motion, he closed the distance, grabbed the enemy by the throat, and hurled him across the street. The Velkar soldier slammed into a nearby wall, crumpling into a heap. Maxim was unstoppable. His team followed his lead, cutting through the Velkar forces with lethal efficiency. The aliens' advanced technology was no match for humanity's sheer will and determination. Once the immediate threat was neutralized, Maxim and his team continued toward the command center. The Velkar, realizing their soldiers were falling quickly, retreated into the building, preparing for a final stand. But Maxim could see the fear in their eyes. They had underestimated Earth, and now, they were paying the price. "We're almost there," Jorah said, breathless but resolute. "We break through, and it's over." Maxim's gaze hardened. "We're not stopping until we've taken everything." The command center was just ahead, its massive metal doors sealed tight. As Maxim and his team reached the entrance, they found it locked and fortified with the latest Velkar security systems. But these were no match for the human determination that had brought them this far. Maxim pulled a small device from his belt, a high-tech explosive designed to breach even the toughest of alien barriers. Without a word, he planted the device on the door and stepped back. The rest of the team took up defensive positions, ready for whatever was on the other side. A few moments later, there was a deafening explosion. The door blew off its hinges, and the team stormed into the command center. The room beyond was massive, filled with holographic consoles and alien technology. But the heart of the Velkar war machine was not just the technology, it was the council of generals and commanders that led them. And now, they were standing in the center of the room, waiting for the humans to enter. The Velkar leaders, tall and imposing, stood at the far end of the chamber. Their cold eyes trained on Maxim and his team. Their armor gleamed in the dim light, their weapons drawn. But it was clear they were not as confident as they had been before. At the head of the council stood Lord Korath, the Velkar general who had been tasked with bringing Earth to its knees. Maxim had heard stories of Korath, the fearsome warrior who had crushed countless civilizations with his own hands. But now, the general looked uncertain. His empire was crumbling, and he knew it. Maxim stepped forward, his voice steady and powerful. "This is the end, Korath. Your empire is finished. We've taken your city. And soon, we'll take everything else." Korath's expression hardened, and he raised his weapon. "You may have won today, human, but you'll never defeat the Velkar. We are eternal." Maxim's eyes locked onto Korath's, and for a moment, there was silence between them. Then, Maxim spoke again, his voice unwavering. "You're not eternal. You're just another empire that thought it could crush humanity. But you've learned something today, Korath. You've learned that Earth doesn't bow to anyone." With that, Maxim charged forward, closing the distance between him and the Velkar general. Korath, desperate to prove his dominance, swung his blade toward Maxim. But Maxim was faster. He sidestepped the attack, his strength surging as he countered with a powerful punch. The force of it sent Korath staggering backward, his weapon flying from his hand. The battle between the two was fierce, each blow shaking the room. Korath was a skilled warrior, but Maxim was driven by something deeper, an unbreakable will. He wasn't fighting for himself, he was fighting for Earth, for his people, for everything they had suffered and sacrificed. With one final, devastating blow, Maxim struck Korath down, sending the Velkar general crashing to the ground. The room fell silent. The Velkar commanders watched in stunned disbelief as the humans stood over their fallen leader. Maxim breathed heavily, his muscles aching from the fight, but there was no satisfaction in his eyes. This wasn't just a victory. It was a statement. Humanity had come to the galaxy, and they would never be pushed out again. "We're done here," Maxim said to his team. "The Velkar Empire is finished." The soldiers behind him nodded, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and triumph. The galaxy would never be the same. And Earth would stand tall. As they left the command center, Maxim's thoughts were already on the future. The war wasn't over yet. But today, humanity had shown the galaxy what it meant to be Earthborn, and the galaxy would remember it. The air above Korthul was thick with smoke and fire, the remnants of warships streaking through the sky like falling stars. The city, once the beating heart of the Velkar Empire, lay in ruins. Buildings that had once gleamed with alien technology were twisted metal and shattered stone. Fires burned unchecked, their smoke curling into the sky, marking the human victory. Yet amidst the destruction, Maxim Baird felt no relief, only the weight of what had been accomplished and the challenges that still lay ahead. He stood at the entrance to the command chamber, the seat of Velkar authority. The room had been stripped of its leaders. Many had fled, and the few remaining warriors were either defeated or surrendering. Maxim looked over his team, the Earthborn soldiers who had followed him through impossible odds, their faces streaked with dirt, blood, and sweat. They were alive, but they had seen death on a scale most humans could never imagine. Yet, they had endured. They had fought, and they had won. "Is it really over?" Jorah asked, stepping beside him. Her voice was low, almost uncertain. She had been through battles that would have broken most soldiers, but even she seemed unsure if victory was fully theirs. Maxim shook his head, scanning the room with sharp eyes. "Not yet. The war may be slowing, but the Velkar are still out there. Their fleets, their other worlds, they won't accept defeat easily. What we've done here is a beginning." "A statement," Jorah nodded, understanding the weight behind his words. The destruction of Korthul was more than just a victory. It was a turning point. For centuries, the Velkar had ruled fear through strength, conquering worlds with their advanced technology and relentless armies. Humans had been considered insignificant in this great cosmic struggle, yet here they were, standing victorious in the heart of the Velkar Empire itself. Maxim's eyes turned to the horizon, where the remnants of Velkar warships struggled to regroup. He could see the fear in their formations, the hesitation that came from underestimating their opponent. The galaxy had been wrong about humanity, and now, they were learning the consequences of that mistake. "Maxim," one of the soldiers called out, snapping him back to the moment. "Reports are coming in from the perimeter. The Velkar are retreating in several sectors. Some worlds are already signaling surrender. They're scared." Maxim allowed himself a small, grim smile. The stories he had heard from veterans were true. The Velkar, for all their power, feared what humanity was becoming. And now, with Korthul fallen, that fear would spread across the Empire. He walked toward the central console of the command chamber. The room was filled with holographic projections of the galaxy, flickering as the Velkar systems struggled under human control. He touched one of the panels, accessing communications and fleet movements. It was chaotic, but he could already see a pattern emerging. The Velkar were no longer unified. Their fleets, scattered across countless systems, were in disarray. "This is our chance," Maxim said, turning to his team. "The galaxy has seen what we are capable of. We push forward. We don't just defend, we take the fight to them. Every world, every fleet, every command center. Humanity won't wait for the Velkar to strike again. We strike first." There was a murmur of agreement among the soldiers. They were tired, wounded, and weary, but they understood the truth in Maxim's words. The galaxy would not be safe for humanity until the Velkar were no longer a threat, and Maxim, the soldier who had cracked the siege gate with his bare hands, would lead them. From the shadows of the room, a sudden movement caught Maxim's eye. A figure emerged, tall and imposing despite its injuries, a Velkar commander who had hidden during the battle, now stepping forward. Its armor was battered, its weapon barely functional, but there was defiance in its stance. "You may have won here, human," it said, its voice rough but controlled. "But this is not the end. The Velkar will rise again. You cannot destroy an empire with fists alone." Maxim met its gaze steadily. "Empires fall when they underestimate their opponents. You thought humans were weak. You were wrong. And now, the galaxy knows it too." The Velkar commander hesitated, realizing the truth in his words. Even the most hardened of their leaders could not ignore what had happened. The humans had taken the heart of the Velkar Empire with determination, courage, and strength that no technology could match. Maxim stepped closer, his presence commanding. "Tell your leaders this. Humanity is not a race to be crushed. We will fight for our worlds, for our people, and for the freedom of the galaxy. The Velkar can retreat, regroup, or hide, but we will always rise to meet them. And every time, they will see that humans do not yield. We do not break. We only grow stronger." The Velkar commander lowered its head slightly, acknowledging the words. Maxim turned away, addressing his team again. "This is just the beginning. We secure Korthul, stabilize the systems under our control, and then we take the fight to the rest of the empire. Humanity will not wait for fear. We will create it in the hearts of those who try to conquer us." Outside, the city began to settle. The fires burned on, but the smoke carried a new message to the stars. Earth had arrived. Humanity's reach had extended into the heart of an empire. The galaxy, which had once whispered warnings of human weakness, now murmured stories of the Earthborn doom. Soldiers and civilians alike spoke in awe of Maxim Baird, the man who had broken the siege gate, shattered armies, and turned fear into a weapon for his people. Maxim looked over his team, and for a moment, he allowed himself a rare pause. The humans around him were battered, bloodied, and exhausted. But their eyes reflected something stronger than any technology or weapon. They had fought against the impossible and won. They had faced the mightiest warriors in the galaxy and emerged victorious. That was not luck. That was humanity. He thought of the stories he had grown up hearing, the tales of Earth's resilience, of humans surviving in harsh conditions, of people facing dangers that no one else could endure. Those stories had always seemed distant, almost mythical. Yet now, they were real. Every soldier in that room, every human who had fought and survived, was a testament to what their species was capable of. "Maxim," Jorah said softly, breaking the silence. "What now?" Maxim's gaze turned to the horizon, where the first light of a new day was breaking through the smoke. "Now," he said, his voice firm, "we show the galaxy that humanity doesn't wait for its place in the stars. We take it. Every system, every colony, every world that wants freedom from tyranny, we give it to them. And the Velkar? They'll learn what it means to face a species that refuses to be crushed." The team nodded, their resolve strengthened. They had seen their leader fight with nothing but his fists and willpower, and had witnessed the impossible. And now, they understood that humanity's strength wasn't in weapons or numbers, it was in determination, courage, and unity. Maxim moved to the communications console, sending messages to allied fleets and outposts. Orders, encouragement, and warnings spread across human-controlled space. The Velkar were on notice. Earth's warriors would not rest, would not hide, and would not forgive. Humanity was coming. In the days that followed, word of the victory at Korthul spread throughout the galaxy. Other human colonies began organizing their defenses and launching counteroffensives. The Velkar, once confident in their dominion, now scrambled to respond. their empire rattled by what a single human, and those who followed him, had achieved. Maxim walked through the ruins of Korthul, observing the aftermath of the battle. Fires still burned, but soldiers moved to secure the area, treating the wounded and organizing defenses. Human flags were raised where Velkar banners had once flown. This was more than a victory, it was a symbol. Humanity had survived, had fought, and had won, and the galaxy would remember it. He stopped at the top of a collapsed building, looking out over the city. The horizon was streaked with smoke and fire, but beyond it, there was hope. The galaxy was wide, filled with countless stars and countless worlds. But now humanity had a foothold that could grow into something unstoppable. Maxim allowed himself a small smile. The road ahead would be long and dangerous. The Velkar were not finished, and other enemies would surely arise. But for the first time in history, humans had proven that they were more than just survivors. They were warriors, conquerors, and defenders of their own fate. He clenched his fists, feeling the strength that had carried him this far. The legend of the Earthborn doom was not just a story, it was reality. And as long as he and his people stood, the galaxy would remember that humanity would never back down. Maxim turned back to his soldiers. "We have won the first battle," he said, "but the war is not over. We move forward. We take our place in the stars, and we make sure that no one ever underestimates humanity again. Remember this day. Remember what we have done, and remember that we fight not just for victory, but for every life that has ever called Earth home." As the sun rose over the burning city, the human soldiers raised their weapons and cheered, a sound that echoed across Korthul and beyond. It was a sound of triumph, of courage, and of determination. The galaxy would hear it, and the Velkar would never forget it. And in that moment, Maxim Baird, the man who had cracked the siege gate with his bare hands, knew that humanity's true power was not in machines or weapons, it was in the hearts of its people. As long as they stood together, the galaxy would belong to them. Humanity was here, and it was unstoppable. The story of Korthul would become legend, and the legend of the Earthborn doom would inspire generations to come. A reminder that no matter how impossible the odds, humans would rise, fight, and never, ever yield. Humanity had claimed its place among the stars, and nothing would ever change that.